There's an extraordinary claim today by Telstra Chairman John Mullen. He says the NBN, the government's national broadband network, is almost $50 billion worth of wasted taxpayer money. Mullen told Telstra's annual general meeting today that all Australians would have had access to high-speed internet by now at a fraction of the cost if the Rudd Labor government had left it to private telcos and not decided to itself build the NBN. Prime Minister Kevin Rudd in 2007 said, well, companies like Telstra, they couldn't build a network at the right price, so the government would. And they'd give Australians one that would deliver super-fast internet, 100 megabits per second. Joining me is Steve Conroy, who was the Communications Minister who, with Kevin Rudd, decided to build the NBN. Thank you very much for your time, Steve.
Good to be with you, Andrew.
You've been battling the NBN ever since you thought of it, 2007. Now, he says, Telstra chairman, he says the private sector competition between strong players such as Telstra, Optus, etc., they were always going to build 100 megabits per second broadband access and speed to most Australians and at no cost whatsoever to the taxpayer. Was the government then wrong to build it?
Look, I think a bit of amnesia has crept into the Telstra's board, because what you've got to remember is that in 2006-7, Telstra, one of the biggest companies in Australia, had a monopoly grip on the telecommunications sector. It owned half of, at that stage, this very station, Foxtel. It owned the cable that Foxtel was broadcast on, the HFC cable. It owned the copper in the network. We had the most heavily concentrated monopoly of control in any telecommunications sector in the world.
Well, to be fair to Mullen, he says, look, part of the blame is Telstra's because we were recalcitrant in coming forward to building something.
I've got one name to remind Mr Mullen of, and I'm not sure, apologies if he was on the board back then, Sol Trujillo. For those who don't remember Sol Trujillo, he waged a war on the Howard government and attacked the Howard government for having any sort of regulation in the telecommunications sector. Then they presented a plan. Telstra, the company, not even just Sol, Telstra, the company, presented a plan to the Howard government that offered to build a faster broadband network in 5 major capital cities. No Hobart, no Perth, no Adelaide, 5 major capital cities, and just a bit north and just a bit south of Sydney. And then it said, and the government can build the rest of the national network and we'll interconnect with it. They offered the government to spend the biggest white elephant in history.
That said, I just wonder whether more couldn't have been done to get the private telcos to do it, expand the competition, because have a look. The promise was for broadband at 100 megabits per second, but the most popular plans now are for much slower speeds, you know, the 15, the 12, the 25, the 50 megabits plans.
No one sells the 12 anymore. So let's
well,
the ACCC are actually investigating the telecommunications industry at the moment because no one will offer the 12, which is the lowest cost.
But the point is that
you walk into a Telstra shop, they will not even offer it to you.
They're trying to migrate people all the way up to the, you know, to the higher end sort of stuff. But the point is, 1250, was it over-engineered to be offering everyone 100?
Fibre optic cable has no 100 meg cap. It can do a gig, it can do 10 gig, it can go faster. It is almost limitless. This wasn't over-engineering if you're looking at the years 2010 to 2020, but in 2020 to 2030 and onwards, this was a network that you didn't have to go in and reinvest in. Even today, the 3 to 4 million Australians who are still using the copper, as in what's called fibre to the node, those boxes in around the suburbs, 3 to 4 million, they can't get on average more than 70 meg. The ACCC have sued almost every single one of the regulators and fined them for selling product that they can't deliver the speeds on. So hundreds of thousands of Australians have been charged by these telecommunication companies for a 50 meg plan or a 100 meg plan that they can't deliver. And they've had to pay the money back.
Well, you mentioned some of the dissatisfaction. You've got connections now available to more than 10 million homes. So far, only 6 million have joined the NBN network. Again, it's another way of asking the same question again, I guess, is was this over-engineered? Was there too much?
We haven't been through the final cut-off where they actually cut the copper off and force you to go across. Yep. Well, you're forced to use the copper line at the moment if you wanted to live in a house. The problem you've got, though, is for the first time, NBN Co itself, in its own last annual report, and I'm tragic for still having any interest in this, actually revised down the take-up rate. Because what's happening is now that 5G is coming online in the mobile world, the 5G network will be faster than the copper-based network. Those fibre to the node homes, that 3 to 4 million homes, if they are smart, they will not bother taking up a rubbish 70 meg connection. They will actually just not take up NBN at all and go mobile. But to reverse your own question, Andrew...
Which is one thing I was arguing at the first start.
As a competitor, 5G is a competitor against the copper-based FTTN. It's not a competitor against fibre to the premise because it can never match that. But it can actually outstrip the 3 to 4 million poor Australians who are going to be stuck on the copper network, and NBN's own internal work proves it.
But look, so a lot of people aren't using the NBN that they've paid for after 13 years. A lot of people are getting slower speeds than the NBN was designed for. A lot of people are not getting the services they paid for either. And the ACCC says NBN customers tend to pay $10 a month more for the NBN than they paid for the equivalent data plans on ADSL. I mean, is there any doubt as to whether we actually did the right thing or you actually did the right thing?
Look, if you go around anywhere in the world, you will get the same advice from the technology experts. Fibre to the premise is the future. Do it once, do it right, do it with fibre. Famous thing Tony Windsor said in 2010.
Don't quote Tony Windsor at me.
And he was right then. As much as you mightn't like him, he was right then. And every technology expert will tell you the same thing. NBN Co themselves know they will have to spend billions of dollars to upgrade their own existing network over the next from 2010 to 2030. They know they're going to have to spend money. They just pretend that they don't.
Before I go, I quoted Labor MP Kim Carr before saying that we shouldn't make a big fuss about universities doing research with communist China, and that people are warned about it. There were Cold War warriors, and besides, America could also threaten our cybersecurity. What do you make of his contribution?
Look, I think the left in Australia broadly has got to try and be consistent about this. It has continually criticised governments of both political persuasions that you can't train foreign troops who might then be used in oppression. You can't sell weapons to countries that can use Australian helicopters to oppress their citizens. And yet it's OK to do research with a country like China to help it oppress its citizens. This is not a consistent position. So this is not anti-China bashing. This is just saying, understand, try and be consistent, the left in Australia.
Look, Labor's got to get its head around the China issue at the moment. I think some people are sort of being outliers here. Steve Conroy, thank you so much indeed for your time.